Is the American dream dead? Well, maybe not if you have $1.8 million, because this house right over here is about $1.8 million. That's how much they're asking for it. But when this person bought this house back in 1998, it only cost $190,000. And you could easily say that the American dream was much more attainable back in 1998 versus 2025 when somebody wants 1.8 million for the same house. Is it really reasonable to think that this house has 10x'd in value over the past couple of decades? I don't think so. Not much has really happened except for a crazy amount of inflation, but even the inflation that we have seen is not enough to account for making this house 10 times more expensive. Because basically nothing else is 10 times more expensive as it was back in 1998. You know, cars aren't 10 times more expensive. Food isn't 10 times more expensive, but housing is. So this is what we're going to try to attempt to answer in today's video. Is the American dream dead? Now, for many people, the American dream is simply just being able to have the opportunity and have enough money to be able to own your own home one day. That is the symbol of the American dream. And that reality is slipping away for many every single year as the price of homes continue to outpace wages. You see, if we go back to the World War II era, after many of our veterans came back home from fighting the war, there was plenty of access to affordable housing in America, and you could easily buy a house off of one income, and people got pensions, and life was pretty good. And the American dream wasn't just buying your own home, but it was hope, a hope for a better tomorrow, especially after going through such a tough time. But if you fast forward to today, the economic picture is quite different, and income inequality is greater than it's ever been. You have wages for middle and lower income earners basically stagnant and have not kept up with inflation or even close to it, while people that have high-end executive jobs like CEOs are taking home the lion's share of all the gains. And then, of course, it's not just housing. All the other expenses that go along with life have soared over the past 5 years and has made life become unaffordable for the average American. And so now housing affordability is the largest barrier to obtaining the American dream. So it's pretty safe to say that today's housing market is completely out of balance, and that's why we're in a situation now where the inventory is starting to creep back up, but there are now more sellers than there are buyers. And the worst part is that entry-level homes or starter homes are the type of homes that most investors target to buy up because they typically have the best cash flow and they can obtain more of them. And also they're targeting people who maybe would want to buy their own home, and this is what they can afford to rent. Meanwhile, it reduces the inventory for people who want to get into home ownership and can no longer afford it because all the starter homes are gone. And speaking of affordability, we're not going to spend too much time on this since we have spent many hours on this before in previous videos. But right now, the median home price in America is about $395,000. So if you want to put down a 10% down payment, you basically need 40 grand, and you're going to need a loan amount of about $350,000. And interest rates actually just went up today to 7.25%, the highest they've been in a while due to the spiking treasury yields. This means that the average mortgage payment right now, depending on where you are in the country, is anywhere between $2,800 and $3,100 per month. And in order for somebody to be able to afford that monthly payment, you need to make about $120,000 to $135,000 a year, $110,000 at the very minimum. But the problem is the average household only earns $75,000 to $80,000 a year. So just by looking at it from that perspective, is the American dream dead? I think it's safe to say that it is, unless you have plans to seriously increase your income if you want to get on the housing ladder. The truth of the matter is that most people are priced out of the housing market as it stands today. If you take a look at this chart right here, this is a regional breakdown of different areas in the country. The green bar shows you the median home price. The red bar shows you the required income, and the blue bar shows you the actual median income for the different regions. And you can see across all 4 regions of the country, the blue bar is the lowest. The median income is the lowest compared to how much money people actually need to be able to buy in this environment. So this whole situation has gotten many Americans starting to rethink, do I really need to buy a house? Or is buying a house just a burden? Is this something that I don't really need to do? Renting is more flexible, it's becoming more affordable in pretty much every area of the country as well. You have other people who are turning to alternative forms of living, like going back to multi-generational households, having roommates, renting out the rooms in the home that they do buy, living in tiny homes, doing van life. People are doing different things to adapt to the current situation. So what people have to do now is they have to redefine what the American dream means for them. In my personal opinion, it shouldn't revolve around home ownership these days. In 2025, the American dream should revolve around financial freedom. And if owning a home fits into that financial freedom plan, then great. But if it doesn't, who cares if you don't have any debt and you have enough money to retire one day or feel financially comfortable? It doesn't really matter if you own a home if you have a comfortable lifestyle. That's how I see it. Because with the cost of home ownership these days, people are paying insane amounts of money to be able to just maintain the house and pay for the property taxes and insurance, all the things you've heard me say before. And a lot of that money could be better invested into other higher performing assets that's not just costing you money every single month. And the good news is that the younger generations are starting to embrace things like mental health, work-life balance, and experiences over accumulating material possessions. They're starting to realize that those are the things that mean the most to them, and that's what achieving the American dream means. However, nobody wants to work forever. Nobody wants to be a slave to the system forever, but obtaining and buying a house doesn't guarantee you a ticket out of that. That's why I encourage everybody who watches my channel to learn as much about debt and investing as they can, because without financial education, it's hard to really get anywhere in today's world. You're not going to be able to achieve your version of the American dream if you don't know what you're doing with your finances. So here's what I think you should be focusing on if you want to attain your version of the American dream. First and foremost, if you have debt, get out of it. Regardless of what kind of debt it is, unless you already own a home and we're talking a mortgage, that's the only thing that's exempt from this conversation. If you have credit card debt, you have auto loan debt, you have student loan debt, anything like that, personal loan debt, get out of it, pay it off. Simultaneously, while you're doing that, find different ways to increase your income. I don't care what it is, as long as it's legal, do it. And if you're simultaneously doing both, once you're out of debt, and you have increased your income, now you will have extra money to save and invest towards your future, which is going to lead to a situation where you're going to be able to achieve your American dream, whatever that is. But I think people need to drop the mentality that, oh, if I can't buy a house by the time I'm 35, I'm a loser. No, that's not true at all. Because say you have over $1 million saved for retirement and you have no debt, but you don't own a house, does that make you a loser? Absolutely not. And don't forget, like we talked about the other day, there is going to be over 40 million baby boomers passing away in the next 20 years that are going to be leaving their property to the next generation. So that could be somebody in Gen X, it could be a millennial, it could even be somebody in Gen Z. The point is, the younger generations are going to start inheriting more of America's housing inventory just because of pure demographics. Now, it might not be the house you want to own, but you can always sell that house and take the money and buy the house you do want to own if you're lucky enough to receive that inheritance. So hope is not all lost. All the houses that are here, the people who own them right now, once they die, they can't take them with them, okay? So somebody's going to get these houses. And most of the time, parents will leave their home to their children. Whether or not there's any equity left in it, or whether or not they had a reverse mortgage or they borrowed to the hilt on the house is an entirely different story, but it could be a leg up when you need it the most. But to be honest with you, as somebody who sold real estate full-time for 13 years, this is not really a discussion that came up most of the time. Most people never bought a home from me because they said, oh, I've always wanted to be a homeowner, it's part of the American dream. No. Most people did it because they had the money, they got a gift from a parent for a down payment, they would be a co-signer, something like that. or it was just the right time in their life to make that purchase. It made sense. People weren't chasing the American dream, believe it or not. I don't even think in the 13 years I was doing that conversation ever came up with anybody. What came up were priorities around their lifestyle and location and features that they wanted to have in their home. Those are the things that were the most important, not their social status or whether or not they were a homeowner or not. Me personally, I never actually cared about owning my own home. I learned from a pretty early age that the smart thing to do would probably be to rent where I live and to own investment properties. And that's exactly what my wife and I did for a while. And the only thing that influenced our opinion and our decision to actually buy was the pandemic, because the rent prices here in Miami got more expensive than actually owning something of similar size. But if we never had the pandemic, I don't think we would have had the push to buy our own place. I think we would have just kept going with the setup we had, where we would continue renting, paying very low prices in rent, and use the extra savings that we're having from low rent on buying more investment properties. As of right now, we're completely out of the landlord business. We sold our investment properties and now we just own the place that we live in. But I would consider going back into being a landlord once the conditions for real estate start to favor it. Because right now, being a landlord is not a great proposition considering the price that you have to pay for the home, considering the maintenance and upkeep costs for the home, and the fact that rents are starting to decline in most parts of the country. That's not a great winning formula for producing a good cash flowing property right now. So I can wait. And apparently I'm not the only one who can wait, because we just got the most recent report for pending home sales, and pending home sales fell pretty heavily from March to April in 2025 here. According to the National Association of Realtors, pending home sales index went down 6.3% in April, even though it went up 5.5% in March. And remember, April's another busy month for the home selling season. You know, basically March through July are these busy months. So there was a 5.5% gain in March, but it was completely wiped out by the 6.3% decline in April. Economists were expecting only a 1% drop, and it dropped by 6.3%, guys. Far below what any of the economists thought would happen. And this brings us to a year-over-year figure of pending home sales going down 2.5% year-over-year. And even though inventory has been on the rise across the country, the home sales continue to go down. So what does that tell you? It tells you that most people are priced out, and the ones who aren't are not interested in buying. And I can guarantee you the people who are buying right now are the ones who fit into the category like I was explaining earlier, just like all of my past clients. They have a moment in their life where it's just the right time to buy. They have the money, they're settling down in a location, they like the neighborhood, they're gonna commit to being there for a while, and yeah, okay, we're gonna buy. That's the reason people buy. And the dynamic for the housing market is really shifting in a big way right now. There's about 500,000 more sellers right now as of April than there are buyers. That's a huge discrepancy. So much for it being a seller's market. When you have that many more sellers versus buyers and buyer demand, that's all but a guarantee that you're going to continue to see price declines. You're going to see sellers slashing prices to offload the property. So it's going to be the only way to get someone interested in this environment. And many sellers are still in disbelief and think that somehow their home is special and somehow it's going to sell for way above what the average home sells for in their neighborhood. Even though there's other homes sitting on the market for 6 months, somehow mine's going to be different. And just take a look at this chart here, going back the last 10 years, pending home sales have been falling for a long time actually. They've just been on this steady decline. Fewer and fewer people are buying homes over the past 10 years. What do you think the reason for that is? Oh, maybe the price? And you know, when I saw this story, it just put a big smile on my face that I want to share with you guys. Barbara Corcoran, the Shark Tank investor, the big real estate mogul out of New York City, she has been in the news on and off over the past several years, especially during the pandemic real estate market, saying the best time to buy was yesterday, the second best time to buy is today kind of person, right? She's a saleswoman, she owns a big real estate company, she has a lot of vested interest in making sure people continue to buy homes. Well, check out Barbara's success story here with her Manhattan penthouse, okay? She bought this Manhattan penthouse in 2015 for $9.95 million, 10 years ago, right? She spent $2 million on renovations, and she just listed the home back in the beginning of May this year, and it only took 1 day to sell the property, but guess what? It sold for $12 million. So do the math. She spent $12 million, and she's selling for $12 million, and think about how bad inflation has been over the past 10 years. Forget 10 years, the last 3 years. In fact, let me pull up my inflation calculator here on the phone, just to give you guys an idea here, okay? So going back to 2015, if you spent $12 million like she did, that would be a little over $16.2 million in 2025. And you could argue that it's actually way higher than that because this inflation calculator just uses the official numbers to calculate inflation. So that's over a $4 million discrepancy there. And you could argue that Barbara Corcoran and her husband actually lost over $4 million when you factor in inflation over the 10 years that they own this property. Because when you buy it for $12 million and you sell for $12 million, you're already making zero profit. You paid all the property taxes along the way, maintenance, upkeep, insurance, HOA fees for this expensive penthouse, I'm sure were through the roof over the years, but not even factoring all those expenses in, right? We're just talking about what you paid and what you sold it for. There was essentially no gain. There was a $2 million gain in the actual sales price that was immediately lost when she renovated the unit. And if she never renovated the place, there's no way she would have been able to get $12 million today. She might even have had to sell it at a loss. But I want everybody to think about this because this is a very important story, because this is somebody that tells everybody you got to buy a house, right? That's the only way to get ahead in this country. You should always be buying a home. Renting's a waste of money. Well, Barbara's own personal story shows you that that's not true. When factored in for inflation, Barbara lost over $4 million on this property, and way more than that when you account for all the expenses that were poured into the property over the years. And this is somebody that's been telling people to buy for a long time. You know, in fact, just a few months ago, she said the perfect time to buy a house when you can afford the down payment, not when you're waiting for the perfect market. Now, there is some truth to that. I'm not going to completely attack that statement because, like I was saying earlier, most of my clients, they weren't chasing the American dream or the housing market. They were chasing a lifestyle. It was the right moment at the right time for them to buy, and they did. That's what people do. When they sell or they buy, they do it when the time makes sense. And don't forget to use my real estate link down below if you need a real estate agent. Here's her saying just a few months ago, houses went up 4% this last year, and they're going to go up more next year. So you're not really saving anything by waiting. And that pattern will continue for the foreseeable future. Prices are just going to continue to go up. Interest rates aren't coming down, so you might as well get out in the market and do something about it. That's a quote from Barbara Corcoran. Well, okay, you can just look at the surface level, like, yeah, Barbara, you know, gained $2 million. She sold this place for $2 million more in 10 years. So real estate always goes up. But look at the whole picture, guys, whatever I just explained to you and showed you. She spent $2 million on a reno. She had property taxes, insurance, and HOA fees for the past 10 years on this property. She got pummeled by inflation like everybody else. Did she really make any money? No, she didn't. She actually lost money. And that's what I want everybody to understand about buying a home. It's not this giant grand promise of getting rich like everybody claims it is. Now, if you just rent and you don't invest any of your money, you are going to be poorer than somebody who bought a home and is building equity over the years. That's a fact. I am not disputing that. But what I am telling you is it doesn't have to be your version of the American dream. If you'd rather put your money into starting a business that is going to be very profitable, or use that money for other investments that's also going to make you money, it doesn't matter if you own your house or not. Barbara Corcoran's advice is also to invest for the long term. Yeah, well, she did that. She held this place for 10 years, and look how well that worked out. Not too good. The only part of her advice I agree with is that it's smarter not to wait. Like if you have the money to actually buy today, but you're just not happy with the price, then maybe it makes sense to buy now if there's other reasons other than financial gain. You know, in that sense, I think it makes sense to buy. If you need a house because you're starting a family, or you want to be settled into a certain school district for a long time, or you just love the area and you know you're going to be there for a long time, then I think it makes sense. But if you're just buying because rich celebrities that have a vested interest in making sure the next generation buys homes is telling you to do so, I would be very cautious, because buying a house is not the American dream. Being financially independent, having enough money in savings where you don't have to worry, having FU money, having retirement money, that's the American dream. So that's what people need to focus on. And I would suggest looking up this Barbara Corcoran story for yourself and just doing the math, guys, and taking a look at it just like I showed you here, and see how much money did Barbara actually make. It wasn't $2 million. It was more like a negative $6 million, probably all in all in the end. Just imagine if Barbara would have used that $12 million back in 2015 and invested it in the stock market and had all those gains, or invested it into gold and silver and had all those gains without the downside. Because yeah, real estate has gone up with inflation, but so has all that other stuff, and those things don't have carrying costs like real estate does. That's why real estate can just drain your wallet, because of the sheer amount of money it costs to just hold on to that property is something that other assets that doesn't have in common with. So really think this stuff through and really understand what the American dream means for you. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.